Hello, this is Dot. Happy New Year to you all. Today I wanted to do another video about the Housewives Tarot, a deck by Kepple and Jude Buffum from the Quirk books. So I have already done one video about this deck, and in that video I wanted to share some of the interpretations of the cards, some of the stories that I saw in the cards, what I was thinking about when I was looking at the images, and just was trying to to express some of the confusion and conflicted emotions that I was feeling when I was working with the deck. And now, after I finish working with it, I have kind of formed my opinion about it, and I just wanted to share it. So I also took some notes, so I hope I will stick to them and this video won't be so rambly. So the first thing that I wrote down was how it surprised me that among all the struggles that I had with the deck, it still worked well for me as a daily pull. So it gave quite good advice when I was taking it at face value, just looking at the image and sometimes even without the context of the name of the card or the position of the card in the deck. And often the image reminded me of something, maybe a situation from now or from the past, maybe a task that I had to do and I was procrastinating or forgot about it. And other times the message was quite direct and practical, even if I took the traditional meaning of the card into account. So, for instance, if I got the Four Pentacles, I would just think, the usual how this woman here has all the resources and she's not using them. So maybe I have something at my hand and I forgot about it and I should use it today. So yeah, very straightforward and direct messages that were quite applicable in my daily life and sometimes even very accurate and almost uncanny. So one thing I think I didn't strengthen the importance in my previous video was how I really appreciate how this is not a Waite-Smith clone, and the depictions here are from daily life. So we have ordinary tasks, we have many household chores, many family situations, interactions with our friends or neighbors. So in this way, this deck is quite relatable, and it somehow brings the esoteric meanings, the big concepts into the ordinary, into an easy to understand and also applicable into daily life advice. So somehow this deck reminds me of the Everyday Enchantment Tarot from Poppy Pauling. I don't have that deck, but from my impressions of seeing it online, it is similar in that it shows also everyday, ordinary life, everyday situations, and we can easily relate to them. But that deck is much more, it shows a much more diverse world. Here we see only white people and middle-class people. It's a very narrow world, narrow view of the world. And in the Poppy Pauling's deck, We see first of all current world, because it's the world of from the UK, from probably from London or some big city in the UK, and it also shows outside world, external world. Here we mostly see situations that take place at home, as the deck name goes, so the Housewife Tarot, so it's very focused on the family and home life. Okay, so let's go back to the depictions. So I like how the depictions in this deck are easy to understand, and at the same time they show all the meanings that are present, for example, in the Waitsmith deck, and in the minors some of the meanings come from the I guess Marseille tradition, or they take numerological approach in the understanding of the card, and this is especially apparent in the majors. So let's look. I like, for example, how the Temperance card is shown here. So we have this butter that is being mixed in this appliance, in the by the mixer, and we have the ingredients. So it's the joy, sorrow, justice, anger. So all the traditional themes that are present in the card are also here. So we see the keyword of mixing, the keyword of amalgamation, of balance, because this joy and sorrow, we can say, are opposing emotions. So there's the balance of two sides. We have the topic of alchemy, because baking is almost like chemistry, and you have to be patient, you have to be very accurate when you're doing it, you have to be skillful while doing it, because it's easy to make something wrong, and then the end result will be also not successful. So you also have to wait until the cake is baked in the oven. So all of the themes are present here, and this is not quite difficult to understand image, as for example in the Waitsmith deck, when we see the angel that is mixing, not mixing, but has these two cups, and the there's the flow of liquid between two cups. So it might be more difficult to understand, and here the meaning is taken into the ordinary and easy to grasp. And another card that I really like from the majors is the Emperor here. So similarly, we have all the themes from the traditional meanings present. So first of all, we have the structure that is being built from those themes and battles, and we are also reliant on this structure, because in the guidebook the authors say how the hero of the deck, or the fool, so the housewife, relies on those food products in her pantry. And we also have, in comparison to Empress, let me get her. And also good thing about this deck is how it's color coded. So the courts, not the courts, but the suits and the majors have different color frames, so it's easy to find the cards. Identify them. Okay, so the Empress and the Emperor. So the Empress shows success in the internal world, in the home, in family world, and here because she's like the role model for all the housewives. She's the mother of all housewives, how the the guidebook has written about this card. And the Emperor is shows the success in the external world, because we see these business companies that are, of course, very successful. And the other thing that is a nice contrast between those two cards is how here the food is probably homegrown, or at least made by hand, or bought at maybe a farmer's market. And here we have, of course, the food that comes from big companies, and it's like a frozen food or this canned food. So it's very, how to name it, industrialized form of a food. So it's food that comes from big industrial farms or big monoculture fields. So in the Emperor we have this theme of unification and homogenization. Everything is almost the same, and the Empress, so the individual needs aren't taken into account, because, you know, in a big factory no one looks at the single cow, but what's important is the overall yield of the farm. And here the Empress is nurturing her plants, or taking into account individual needs of her, of what she takes care of. And other things that are present in the Emperor card here are, for instance, the theme on boundaries, because the food is contained in these metal tins or these plastic bottles. We have, of course, all the food safety regulations. So there's the theme of law and order and safety. So I could go on and on in so many of the majors. I can see all the keywords or the meanings, traditional meanings, that are also present in other decks, in the traditional decks. But here we have it in a quite smart way depicted, and a very interesting way depicted. And it is very apparent in the majors, because, of course, in the minors, even in the traditional deck, we say that the minors depict daily life situations, and majors are like big concepts and big themes. So there's this stark contrast between majors and minors. And here in this housewife deck, both majors and minors show everyday situations, so they are easier to understand. Okay, so other thing that is so probably most people talk about it is the humor of the deck, and I agree that the deck is quite humorous, and especially if you are someone who likes to read guidebooks and take the guidebook entry as your message. So the guidebook is written excellently. It's first of all, it's very humorous, it's fun to read, and also it's a practical advice. And similarly in the cards, everyone is smiling. Some of the images are quite humorous, so there's this light-hearted tone to all of the cards, and I guess this is why so many people like this deck, and it's a very popular deck among the community. Is because it's fun to use, especially it might be fun to use, especially with adult folks, and some maybe friends or family, and people that especially people that don't know much about tarot. It could be a very good deck to use and understand. This deck is full of dark humor and irony and humor in general, and the guidebook the same is full of humor. So if you want to appreciate the humor of the deck, you have to first of all, don't treat the deck seriously, and don't treat yourself seriously. And probably this is one of the problems that I have with this deck, is because I don't have any other deck like this. I have decks that are light-hearted. For instance, I have the Housewives Tarot, which is also a light-hearted and funny deck. But in this deck, in the Housewives Tarot, I feel like the deck is making fun of the situation and making fun of me. And in the Housewives Tarot, for example, I still feel like the deck is trying to make the situation less serious or less challenging, less difficult, but at the same time it acknowledges that I have hard time with the situation. So it's like in a children's book, or when you talk with a child, you say that I'm sorry that you are crying, I'm sorry that you're feeling hurt, but maybe let's try to look at the situation that maybe first of all in a moment you won't feel as bad as you're feeling now, and maybe there are other things that that will help you to deal with the situation. So you're still showing sympathy to a child. And with this deck I have a hard time because it doesn't show me any sympathy towards me. I don't feel that it's nice to me. And probably this is a very subjective impression of this deck, because I didn't even realize it at first why I'm having so much hard time with this deck. And this is because for so many years I had this like a very unhealthy and harmful coping mechanism of telling myself things like this. So telling myself stuff like I'm overreacting, I'm making something bigger than it is, something more difficult than it is. I shouldn't feel so I shouldn't feel so afraid, or maybe I shouldn't feel so challenged by the situation. I shouldn't feel those feelings that I'm experiencing now. So this is a very mean voice, and I don't think that, yes, it was a very harmful voice to have in one's head. And this deck to me is like this. It's like this mean voice that first of all wants to poke jokes at me and say that, ha ha ha, why are you crying? Look past it. Look how this is not so difficult. And yeah, so probably this is why I have difficulty with this humor of the deck that others appreciate and like to take advantage of. So another thing that in a similar way clashes with the humorous tone of the deck is, for me, some of the serious topics that I start to see in this deck when I either look at the images more closely, so dive more deeply in what is depicted and analyze more closely the image, or when I look at the deck as a whole. And this is what I was trying to convey in my previous video. So this is why I was sharing some of the interpretations of the cards. So I start to see many shadow aspects of the cards. Many of the cards don't show for me neutral representations of the meaning of the card, but a more darker or more not a positive, how we often say, not the positive meaning of the card, but the negative meaning of the card. And so I was, okay, and here's the Justice card. So also we see So this, for instance, this justice card for me doesn't show a fair justice at all, but this is a justice that is totally unacceptable. For me, this is a justice that doesn't serve its purpose at all and shouldn't be used. This kind of punishment shouldn't be used at all, and they don't work at all. So this justice card doesn't show justice for me, but instead it shows injustice. And in a similar way, when I start to look at the deck as a whole, what kind of story does it tell? And of course, this deck is correlated to the real world because it's ingrained in this 1950s aesthetics. So it relates to real world, to real people and real society, problems of that society. So I think about those issues, about issues of that society and issues of the society today. This is what I was talking about in my previous video. I start to think about some serious topics like inequality, like gender expectations, gender inequality. Some of the depictions are also quite brutal. So we saw the Justice card, which is a very difficult to look at card in this deck. And I also was very, how to say, well, it struck me how brutal is the presentation of the Judgment cards. Where are you? I think we've passed it. Cards are flying everywhere. Where are you? Oh, here. So the Judgment card. It's also a very brutal representation and hard to look at. And so many, so we had child abuse. Here we have some topics related to self-worth and acceptance of one's body and difficulty of accepting one's body, problems with weight, problems with food. The topics are quite serious, and as we all see here, that the tone of the deck isn't serious at all. So the topics that are shown in the deck in a way remind me of the other deck that is New Era Elements Tarot by Eleanor Piper. I also don't have that deck because I thought that it would be so difficult to use and so challenging to use, because in that deck we also see many challenging depictions. I can't remember from the top of my head, but some of the images are very brutal and hard to look at. I remember one depiction that shows some animal torture, I think, or at least animal abuse, something like that. There is one depiction of drug abuse. So also serious topics that I see in this deck too, in the Housewives Tarot, but in the New Era Elements, the tone of the deck isn't humorous at all. So there isn't any kind of clash between what is depicted and what the deck what the deck is talking about. And here we have these people that are smiling, the images that look like advertisements, and so many smiles are very big and artificial. So like in this Queen of Swords, those people they smile but they don't look happy at all. It's all fake for me. So this deck is like fake happiness that hides dark and shadow truth, that dark truth, that or the dark secrets, like for instance some heavy serious topics and some challenging issues that people face, but they show these smiles on the surface and show how everything is alright and we all having fun and everyone is happy and lovely. So in conclusion, what do I want to say in conclusion? Okay, so this deck for me is probably like a shadow deck, because I don't feel comfortable using it. Well, at the same time, I can use it as a working deck, as I said in the beginning. I can use it on the surface level. I can interpret the image literally, or I can look at it. Don't look. I can. I can look at it without over-analyzing the image, or without over-analyzing the image in the context of other cards, or the context of real world. For instance, real world people and society of 1950s or today's society. So I can use it like that, and it works even well for me. But when I want to use it in my preferred way, so my preferred way of using a deck is spending the time with a card and looking at it more closely. I take very much from one image. I don't even need 10 cards to get a meaningful reading. I just take one card and spend more time with it and think, what does the image remind me of, and what details I see in the image, etc. So when I use the deck in my preferred way, over-analyzing it, then the deck becomes like a shadow deck, because so it brings to the light the shadow, so it brings to the light the uncomfortable things to look at, and it brings to the light all the dark stuff, as we often say. So yeah, I I won't call this deck my favorite at all. It isn't any kind of love at first sight, and I won't be tempted to use this deck very often. But in a way, I appreciate it. I appreciate many aspects of it. So, as I said, I appreciate how it brings the esoteric into the ordinary. I liked what they wrote in the guidebook when they called it domestic divination made simple. So yeah, I agree that this deck even could be good for someone who is still learning tarot. So not a first deck, but maybe a second or the third one, where you can, so it can help you learn how big archetypes, big esoteric concepts translate into daily life, into ordinary situations and real life occurrences. And in a similar way, I appreciate the humor of a deck. It might be surprising, but yes, I get why people like it. I get why they want to use it with their friends, because yes, this deck is humorous if you don't treat it seriously. And maybe I have problem with using a deck that doesn't treat me seriously and that requires that I don't treat it seriously too. So all in all, I still feel like a bit conflicted about it, but I get why it is popular and why people like it, and I think it also brings value to my. It can bring value to my life, because it makes me think, or it makes me think about topics that I don't usually think about when using tarot. Because honestly, when I use tarot, I think about myself. I use it for my personal needs, and I don't think about society, or I don't think about problems of people in the past, or problems that don't relate to me myself on a personal level, that I don't experience myself. So I greatly appreciate how this deck makes me think about all those serious topics that trouble real world, our world today, or troubled world of the past, and how it makes me think about those things, and other decks usually don't do this. So all in all, I think this is a quite interesting deck that isn't that has many levels to it, and you can read it on different levels, or have quite different experience with using it. And I'm a bit surprised how it seems like I have a controversial opinion of this deck, because usually what I hear about this deck is that it's humorous and it's fun to use, and some people say that they see their childhood in it, or they just use it with their friends or people who in just like a family gathering or gathering with friends situation, when you use tarot, not to do some serious readings, but just to have fun. And I think this deck could be very good for this. Okay, so I think I will end it here. I think I've shared all I have to say about this deck, and I would love to hear what do you think about it. Do you have this deck, and do you use it only to have fun, or maybe you don't like this deck at all? Maybe some of you share some of the challenges with using this deck that are similar to the challenges that I have. I would love to get some comments from you, and I hope to see you soon. Much love to you. Bye bye.